Hi, glad you're still here on Time for Peace. We've been trying to channel our light through learning different themes in Tanya. So we're at chapter 34, the soul's joy and the body's tears. Rejoice in your fixed times of study when you are God's host in this world. This and other forms of joy do not contradict simultaneous anguish over the limitations of the body. There is so much to say about the power of learning Torah and how it brings us so much joy. You see, the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually teaches us that just like the Jewish people when they were leaving their Mitzrayim and they came upon the vast ocean and Hashem created a miracle and he split the sea, and the question was asked, why a double miracle? He could have just put all the water on one side and then the Jews would have been able to go to their destination, their holy land. So this teaches us from a practical perspective, you need like two sides to really be able to be protected from all the elements. And so too, the message for all time is that we need to build two walls of protection, the side of prayer and the side of Torah learning, so that we can get to our destination, our holy of holies within ourselves. And this chapter, Tanya, leads us the way. In this chapter, I want to focus on a very important concept that relates to psychological and emotional well-being. Yes, we are taught that our patriarchs were capable of reaching a level of such self-nullification. They were considered like chariots that just followed the will of Hashem, just like a chariot follows the will of their driver. And the Tanya tells us that at Har Sinai, we had experienced as a people this level of total self-nullification, so much so that when God spoke the first two commandments, we were so overwhelmed by the power of the holiness that our soul took flight. When I was reading this, I was really thinking about a lot of Hasidic concepts that teach us how important it is for us to be able to make a vessel and create a holy space within us so that God's light, God's energy, God's Torah doesn't overwhelm us and literally can keep us healthy, mind, body, and soul. I want to read you something from Kuntres U'Maayan. And this is from the Rebbe Rashab, and he writes about how mental and emotional disorders comes from an abundance of light and a paucity of vessel. And what that means is that there are certain people who are born with extraordinary lights, extraordinary fire, water, air, and earth elements, more than the average. And because they were gifted with such an abundance of amazing holy qualities, that they are the type of people that need to make more of a vessel to be able to contain these energies so that it doesn't overwhelm them. Kind of like the way we were overwhelmed by God's light and power and energies at Matan Torah. So you see, we have to be aware when we see weaknesses in us, if we see that we have these negative tendencies, it's really a sign of how holy we are and that we just need to create a bigger vessel to contain them. So for instance, Abraham was gifted with a lot of water. He was a chesedic type of personality, and he took pleasure in helping people. He took pleasure in acts of kindness. He was able to attain a really high level of love of Hashem. And Yitzchak was born with a fiery temperament. He was able, with his gevura, with his gift of life that Hashem bestowed upon him, to have yirat Hashem and focus his attention on deep learning Torah in his own tent, even though he was the son of Abraham. So we see that if a person is gifted with extra and they're not channeling it and developing it in a holy way, it ends up becoming a mental or emotional disorder. So someone who has a lot of fire, like Yitzchak, and if it's not channeled, then what happens is it ends up being used in a destructive way. Like, instead of fear, yirat Hashem, it becomes fear, panic, anxiety. Instead of, the fire and passion, it becomes the fire of anger. And so too with the water element. Someone who has a lot of water ends up, instead of loving Hashem and loving kindness like Abraham, they tend to then, when not channeled, to be the addicted personality, to love food or to love money or to love honor. And the earthy personality is the scholarly type that can meditate and contemplate. And if not, that element, when not channeled, becomes like their weaknesses of depression and laziness. And of course, air element, if not used for learning Torah and praying and using their speech in a positive way, then it ends up being used in a destructive way. So one way to really channel your light is to learn how to use fire, water, air, and earth in your prayers and in your learning Torah, so that you use your fire of Av Hashem as you pray and as you learn, and you use your earth, your contemplation and your meditation while praying and learning, and you use your pleasure-seeking personality in your prayers and in your learning, and then you use your air to literally speak the words of prayer and speak the words of your learning Torah. And this is the way in which you will be able to not be overwhelmed by this high energy and light that you've been gifted with, and that way it'll be harbored safely in your mind and in your heart, and you will function with total mental stability.